You need to create your own hope. And it's just having that shining light that you can move towards. You can make two choices. You can sort of go down the victim road, or you can take the victor path. And it's like, I'm not going to be defined by this, and I'm going to make empowered choices for myself to move forward.
Julie Hyde, keynote speaker, author, and leadership coach.
From the corporate world to the profound challenges of a life-altering cancer diagnosis, Julie's journey is a testament to the power of resilience and the impact of choice.
It's just, I suppose, living my purpose in a different way and shining a different light for people who are going through this type of adversity. Like when you're facing your own mortality, that's adversity on another level.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Grow Your Business podcast. I am so excited about having our guest today, Julie Hyde. I was on Julie's podcast a little while ago, and it was such a great conversation. I thought, wouldn't it be great to turn the table and to be able to ask her a bunch of questions? So before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about her. She came from the corporate world and had found herself in this very challenging situation after a life-altering cancer diagnosis. And her journey as a result of that shifted, and we're going to be talking to her about that. She's a seasoned leadership coach. She's the author of You Always Have a Choice and Busy. And she's got a world of experience around her wisdom that she shares with people and really helping businesses and individuals within them look at the complexities of leadership, both professionally and personally. She has spent over 2 decades in the corporate sector. The turning point for her came in 2021. She empowers business leaders to look beyond their immediate challenges and to really make choices that lead to more fulfillment and lead to more success. Julie, welcome.
Thank you, Shivani. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we talk about, and again, your CV is so long, I could have talked for another 15 minutes about that, but you talk about adversity and challenges, and one of my experiences, that's where we find the transformation occurs. So take us through 1 or 2 of those in your journey, whether that was your diagnosis, whether it was other things, and tell us about how that helped you form you into who you are today.
I suppose my cancer diagnosis was my most recent one. But I think one I can pinpoint is back when I was 27, actually. So I was young. I'd been in a relationship for 9 years at that time. So nearly a third of my life. And that ended all of a sudden. And, had the mortgage, had the big home, and all of a sudden I found myself on my own, which I sort of had not been in my adult life because I moved out from parents into this home, and it was very traumatic for me at the time. I don't believe I had a very strong grounding in terms of who I was and what I stood for. And you have to go through the motions, you've got to feel it, you've got to allow yourself that space. And I just remember at one stage I said to myself, you're going to be okay. And that was a real turning point for me, in terms of just getting back in control and reconnecting to really who I was and what I stood for, and going through that whole journey with that at that time. And then another really challenging time, I think, it was in the hangover, I suppose, of the GFC. I just started my business just before the GFC hit, and I was fine up until about 2010, when people really, really started tightening the purse strings. And at that time, I had my own home. I was single as well. And there's a real theme there. um, um, this freak storm had damaged my home, and it was pretty much in ruins. So my one asset that I had was in ruins. My financial situation was pretty dire. And the insurance company was saying that they weren't going to, pay for the damage.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot at that time. And I was out of my home. At the time, I had to move out into a service apartment. And I just remember saying to myself, this will not define me. My back's against the wall. So the best in me is going to come out. And it was at that time when I decided I was going to start my women's networking group, which was Leaders and Lattes back then. And I find that these challenges, when we're facing real adversity, and the financial one was a big one, that you can make two choices. You can sort of go down the victim road, or you can take the victor path. And it's like, I'm not going to be defined by this, and I'm going to make empowered choices for myself to move forward. So I think they're the two biggest ones for me in terms of how that shaped who I am, which is, of course, then helped me through my cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, that's big. There's a lot of wisdom in that, Julie, in terms of what you just shared. And as you said, people have that choice, right? Whether you're going to go down the, okay, I'm going to take this adversity and do something, and most don't. Most actually go the other way. Julie, you help a lot of leaders around looking at their leadership again, both professionally and personally as well. And you've seen some businesses that have grown and others that fall. Like, what are some of the golden nuggets that you've got? One or two nuggets that you go, this has been from your experience and your lens. These have been the best ways to be able to grow your business.
I think it's really making the empowered choices that's in line with their vision. Because I think as entrepreneurs, as business owners, you can get very easily distracted by, oh, this is a great idea. I might go over here, or I might go over there, or someone's told me this. But I think people who are able to elevate their thinking, get out of the weeds and out of the doing, and make sure that they are making really empowered choices and conscious, intentional choices to make sure that they're going to hit their runway. And of course, that's not a straight line. That sort of goes, each way. But I think the leaders who do that are really smart in terms of how they grow their business, why they grow their business, and who they bring on board to enable that to happen, because you can't do that on your own. So I think the empowered choice is elevating thinking and just staying on path and not having that one shiny apple, I think, is really important, rather than having a whole lot of apples sort of lined up and you trying to keep them all shiny.
Yeah, that's really true, isn't it? And because there's so many things, particularly when you're in that first few years of growth, and sometimes I see leaders that are running multi-million-dollar businesses and they've still got so many things that are allocated to them and they're trying to be everything. So yeah, doing that one thing or focusing on the things that's really going to bring that. What about on the people side of it, Julie? Like, what are some of the tips that you've seen to really help your people grow? Because whether you're a business with a small or few number of people, or you're, a medium-sized business with more people, what have you seen work, whether they're philosophies or the way that people treat people? Would love to kind of tap into your wisdom around what you've seen to help people grow.
Yes, and that's a great question coming from you, who's the expert. But I think some of the things I've seen work really well, and I suppose what I've used in my own leadership when I was in corporate in particular with people, is to assume positive intent with people, regardless of whether you're going into a hard conversation, performance review, whatever that looks like. I think assuming positive intent in that people genuinely want to do the right thing in most instances. But I think the intent that you go into any conversation needs to be really conscious and really intentional. And if you go in as a leader with the right mindset in terms of, okay, I'm wanting to empower and enable this person, whatever that looks like, it might be to grow in the business or it might be to exit the business, whatever that looks like. I think that goes a long way in terms of building the respect between the two people, because I think respect is incredibly important. Respect for that person, and also respect for yourself as a leader in terms of you wanting to carry yourself in the way that you're proud of. So removing the emotion from what you're doing and not instinctively acting or reacting when you are feeling emotional, I think is incredibly important. But one thing you talk about, which I 100% agree with, is you need to know what motivates individuals, because every person in that business is different. So you've got to know what works for Mary, or what works for John, or what works for James, because they're very individual people. Some people like public praise, other people would cringe with that, just as an easy example. But I think really getting to know your team and being genuinely present and curious goes a long way for leaders.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think what you just said, something that really struck with me there was not reacting to people. Because sometimes people go, and I've heard leaders say this, and entrepreneurs say this, where they go, yes, but I'm just showing my vulnerability. Like Brene Brown and everybody else has said, well, you've got to show your vulnerability, but the intentionality is different. You know, when it's your intention is to share without, you know, in a way that's going to support your people, great. But I think just not reacting to a lot of stuff, you know, because I know certainly in certain early days, and even now, like with two teenage children, there were times that you sort of react to things, or I react to things. And so I just love the fact that you said, you know, if you can just really park that reaction and do, you know, things differently. Now, you talked a little bit about around having a choice, and I know you've written a beautiful book. Thank you so much for your copy of that. I've started to read it. There's so much wisdom in that book. You always have a choice. And you spoke about where you have that choice to be a victim, or you have that choice to really look at the lessons out of that and, you know, move forward that. You know, how do you, when adversity comes your way, and you talked about the house and you talked about income, and we also started talking in this particular podcast, Julie, about, you know, your cancer diagnosis. Do you, I know you talked about this victim versus looking at things the other way, but is that your process? Do you have other processes? Like, do you get a piece of paper? Do you meditate? Do you, you know, go and sit at the beach? Like, when that challenge comes your way, how do you go about it where you get to the point of making that decision of going either way, if that question makes sense? So I'm really interested, you know, challenge comes your way. How do you address it? How do you get it to the point where you're going, right, now these are the choices that I have, and this is the choice that I'm going to make? Or what drives you also to, you know, because I know at times I go, I just want to be a victim. You know, I know certainly there's been times through COVID where some of my businesses were not doing so well. And, you know, there are times you go, oh my God, I just really just want to go down to this victim path. Like, I'm just always curious about what your process is, or how you go about breaking that challenge up when something comes your way, whether it's small, big or large, and how you go about it.
Okay, it's such a great question. I think if I start with, you know, taking that victim path, it's going to be something that we all do at one stage or another, because we're human. We are not perfect. And it's a natural human instinct to actually take that victim path. We are wired sort of to look at the negatives of things, and we can get stuck in that. So, and I can too. And there's been lots of instances where you sort of look at things, well, even, you know, if we use the cancer, for example, you can very easily go down the track of, why did that happen to me? I want to blame someone. I want to, you know, point the finger. This is not my fault. How has this happened? You know, go down that sort of path. But for me, the trigger in terms of bouncing back is knowing how I feel. So when I feel myself going down that victim path and I'm wallowing and I feel like I've got this negative energy around me, and I listen to my words, it's my trigger point to basically make a different choice, because I don't like being that way. I don't want people to call me a victim. I don't want people to think of me as a victim. That would just be the worst possible thing that can happen to me, to be quite honest. So it's making that choice. And I am very solution focused. I say that is my superpower. in leadership and in life. Like no stacking of a dishwasher will ever beat me because I will find ways to.
I might need you to train a few people in my house, by the way.
I need to train my husband. I'm not doing a very good job. But it's just thinking, okay, this has happened. Where's my opportunity in this? Where's my opportunity? And you might have to look really, really hard. But there's always opportunity and adversity. And I strongly believe that. And I think to build resilience, to tap into your resilience, you need hope. And sometimes, as I've experienced, particularly through cancer, is you need to create your own hope. And it's just having that shining light that you can move towards. And you also mentioned like, what's the process that I go through? It is 100% writing things down. I'm not a massive journaler. I just don't feel that works for me. But I absolutely write things down. So if I've got a million things going through my head or even 10, they come out on paper, because once you see them on paper, you can then do something. You can make choices, you can prioritize, you can scratch stuff out, you can reason with yourself. But it is definitely getting, I suppose, a visual on what's going on in your head and leading yourself through it.
Yeah, wow. I love the way when you spoke about cancer, you almost, or at least the way that I saw that on this particular podcast recording, that you're almost talking about something sort of outside of you, and creating your own hope. Like it's not, because we often think of a thing that hope that just exists, and so you're then trying to tap into something that exists, but you're almost talking about, well, actually, you create that light of that at the end of the tunnel. You create your hope, and that's what you're aspiring towards. That's beautiful. I love the way you worded that. And so today, where things are at, as we're recording this, Julie, take us through what are some of your future aspirations? What are some of the things you want to do in your work? What are some of the things you want to do personally? What other aspirations do you have? Would love to hear more about some of the things in terms of what you're wanting to create in the future.
Yes. So I think my absolute first priority is to be well. That is, I just want to hear those words that you're in remission. And I've been told many a time that that's not going to happen in terms of the type of cancer I've got, but I am determined to hear those words. So I'll do everything in my power to hear those words. But after that happens, like I'd love to travel. I want to travel overseas, and I want to keep on empowering leaders for as long as I possibly can. And ideally, I would love to do that through speaking more so and globally, and mentoring people in terms of really making empowered choices for their life and enabling leaders to, like, while they often have to lead others, to understand that to first lead others, you've got to lead yourself, and you've got to be a really effective leader of you first. And that's what I'm really, really passionate about in terms of empowering leaders to understand that, and to have the self-awareness to understand their triggers, to have their vision, to know what they stand for, to anchor to that. And then for them to shine their light and enable people to step up and to shine their light too. And I strongly believe that the world will be a better place when we have that happening. So I want to influence many millions to do that.
Yeah. And so linked in beautifully around your finding your own hope, the fact that you go, I want to hear those words. That touched me pretty deeply. That's really beautiful. And when I hear you talking like that, often it sounds, and again, there might be different words that people use, but it almost sounds like this purpose that you have, because, when I come across people that are almost obsessed with their purpose, they talk about that they're going to do that till the end of their life. They talk about as if they're going to live for 700 years. Like I come across people that are so obsessed with that. So were you, as you're speaking there, would you put that word purpose to some of the things that you've just shared? Is that how you would define that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is 100% my purpose. And even like through the cancer journey, which is what inspired the book, it's just, I suppose, living my purpose in a different way and shining a different light for people who are going through this type of adversity. Like when you're facing your own mortality, that's adversity on another level.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And when you started answering the last question I asked, you talked about that you needed to be well first. And so when it comes to your well-being, like, do you have rituals that you've already got in place? I use the word rituals or processes, and do you do some of them daily or weekly, or do you do them once a year? Tell us about some of the rituals that you do for your own well-being. And sometimes people look at mental, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes all of the above. So would love, or spiritual, would love to hear some of the things that you do to manage that wellness that you spoke about.
Mm. The biggest thing for me, and it always has been, is exercise. That is something that really serves my mindset well and puts me in a good place. So I always exercise in the morning, whether that's, just going for a walk around the block, if that's all I can manage, or up the street. But most time I can go for a good walk, get out in nature, set my intention for the day, and or I might head to the gym or whatever. I like to feel strong and empowered. So that's my biggest thing. Since my diagnosis, and I couldn't do a lot of exercise initially, I really had to change my routine, because that was a very ingrained routine, the morning exercise. So I couldn't exercise. So it's like, okay, so what else can I do for my mindset? And funnily enough, I started doing meditation. And I say funnily, it's because before this, I never had any time to meditate, apparently. And it was very woo-woo. So it's like, okay, let's get into this. And the more I've done it, the more I've immersed myself into it and understood it, it's just such an empowering and positive thing that you can do for yourself. And just taking yourself out of the day-to-day and carving out some time for you is, I think, so important. I wish I had made different decisions earlier and done that. But I think that's something that complements the exercise, because I love the whole doing of exercise, and but the being of meditation is fantastic. And also I do a gratitude process where I, think about the 3 things that I'm really grateful about today. Some days they might be the same thing, and other days I can find something, but there's always something to be grateful for. And my last one is just reading a book at night. It really helps you to wind down, takes your focus away from everything else that's going on. And I'm talking about fiction books. I don't read business books or anything that's going to stimulate my mind and not help me sleep. It's more fiction, because there is, research that says that reading a book at night can reduce your stress levels by, I think it's something like 50%. Like, it's quite significant.
Wow, that is huge. I didn't
Yes.
realize that.
No, it's quite significant in terms of just following a really great bedtime routine, which I do. I go to bed early as well.
Yeah, me too. People go, do you want to go for dinner at 8? I went, 8 p.m, like, get there at 8? No, it's way too late to eat at 9 p.m. Yeah. The other night we had there was a lovely visitor from overseas, and, when I've been in his country, him and his wife took me out. So we met him at 5 p.m. He was like, is this like afternoon tea? I'm like, no, this is an early dinner, my friend. We'll be home by 8.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Julie, tell the listeners, how can they get in contact with you? How can they find out about you and your work and your books and some of the, extraordinary work that you're producing?
Yes. Well, I suppose the best place to find me is on my website, juliehyde.com.au. That's got everything on there. But also LinkedIn. Like, I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm a prolific sharer and I love to engage in conversations on LinkedIn as well. And of course, Instagram. So they're probably the best three places to get in contact with me and to buy the books.
Yes, and you are an inspiration, Julie. Thank you for being on today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.